Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. It's been a brilliant few days of racing, with way too many championships decided for a single weekend really. Between the entire North American single-seater ladder, F1 with all its support, GT World Challenge Europe and the beginning of the WSK Euro Series, it's been a bit busy to say the least. Hence why I'm here to tell you all about everything that happened. Off we go. Formula 1's Italian GP at Monza had yet another new record from Max Verstappen, extending his win streak to an unbelievable 10 in a row. It did take a tiny bit more work than usual though, as Carlos Sainz actually secured pole position for Ferrari's home race and kept Verstappen at bay for around 15 laps, before the pace of the Red Bulls became too much to handle. He still got to stand on the podium, even though he had to concede P2 to Sergio Perez later on in the race. Sainz still had to defend hard against teammate Charles Leclerc though, resulting in some rather spicy moments. McLaren also had a close inter-team battle until a recovering Lewis Hamilton banged wheels with Oscar Piastri, ruining Piastri's front wing and his chance to score points. Hamilton could outrun the resulting penalty to finish in P6 behind George Russell for a rather organised top 6. Only Alex Albon in his straight-line rocket ship Williams managed to split the Mercs from the McLarens in P7. Formula 2's penultimate round had Frederik Vesti take the win in the sprint race, following a mega start from P3 to take the lead immediately. He then had to defend said lead against charging Victor Martins and pole sitter Richard Verschoor through 2 restarts to bring it home. Theo Pourchaire had to charge from P10 to take home P4 in a pretty successful drive. Art had rapid pace all around. The feature race was a really messy affair, but one with huge implications for the championship, as Vesti got spun and wrecked by Roman Stanek on lap 1. Pourchaire started on pole, but surrendered the lead to Ollie Bearman early on, who never really had to look back, taking a pretty dominant win for Prema. A couple of safety cars later, Ayumu Iwasa had somehow made his way from the back of the field all the way to the front, allowing him to take P2 from Pourchaire at the final restart. This brings Iwasa pretty close to P2 Vesti in the standings. Jack Doohan had a solid race, ending up P6 and thus taking P4 in the standings from Victor Martins, who had to retire from P5 with DRS stuck open. Formula 3 had its final round of the season, and overwhelming favourite Gabriel Bortoleto secured the title ahead of the sprint race as Paul Aron failed to score the pole position points required to keep the fight alive. Aron immediately got set back in his quest for P2 as well, as a left rear puncture at the start of the sprint race sent him spinning into turn 1, taking out Pepe Marti in the process as well. Franco Colapinto managed to take the win after a race-long battle with teammate Mari Boya, positioning himself as a favourite for P2 ahead of the feature race. Bortoleto himself ended up in P2 after a late race move on Boya. All Hitechs and Carlins got DQ'd from quali, allowing for some cool charges from the likes of Gabriele Mini and Luke Browning. Browning in particular with a mega charge all the way to P5 behind the ever-impressing Genza pilot Taylor Barnard. No such heroic charges were possible in the feature race unfortunately, but Barnard managed to impress again by taking P3, following a few really juicy overtakes, including a move around the outside of the first Lesmo corner. The real story in the feature though was pole-sitting Olli Goethe retiring before the formation lap with a broken throttle, getting Johnny Edgar into the position to take his first ever Formula 3 win in what probably was his final race in the category, so congratulations. A lot of heavy hitters had to retire once again, including Colapinto and Marti. Zach O'Sullivan ended up P2 after a decisive drive, at least making his position as lead Prema driver clear at the end of the season. Unfortunately for Trident, the Goethe DNS cost them the team's championship, although it would have been tough anyway. Prema takes the title by 19 points, while both Prema and Trident are over 100 points clear from P3 MP Motorsports, showing just how dominant the two outfits were in F3. Porsche Supercup also concluded its season at the Temple of Speed, and it was one nail-biting final race. Bastian Boos came into the race as the overwhelming favourite, but the usual chaotic Monza experience saw him dumped to the back of the grid after some good old-fashioned T1 chaos. He almost fought his way back into the points, but kept getting minor setbacks, clearly driving with the desperation you'd expect from a man in his position, before a 3 seconds penalty ended his chances of scoring himself. The season would now be decided the way it started, with Harry King defending the lead, and thus his teammate's title, from Larry Tenforde for an entire race distance. This not only means the 20-year-old Dane can celebrate a Porsche Supercup title in only his second season, but also back-to-back team championship titles for the BWT Lechner Racing team. Aussie Harry Jones just about missed out on the rookie title after an epic duel with Simone Iaquinta for P3, swapping positions back and forth until the Italian ultimately came out on top for a satisfying home race podium. Over in the world of American open wheel racing, IndyCar had its penultimate round at Portland, which had Alex Palou secure the championship title in style. The Spaniard started P5 and took the lead over the course of the first pit cycle in classic Palou fashion, and never really had to look back afterwards. His Chip Ganassi teammate Scott Dixon was busy battling Rosenqvist for P2 throughout most of the race, but ultimately lost out due to a very unfortunate late race safety car timing. Graham Rahal started on pole, continuing the good late season form for RLL, but could not quite keep that level of performance over the race distance, not exactly aided by the strategic choices of the squad either. After the announcement that he will not be resigned by Andretti, Roman Grosjean demonstrated why that might have been the case by getting involved in a race-ending incident on lap 1. Joseph Newgarden had a really good drive himself to finish as best of the Penskes in P5, keeping the battle for P3 in the championship against McLaren ace Pato Ward alive until the final round at Laguna Seca. The IndyNXT title fight is still not quite decided after a high attrition race. Major lap 1 pileup took out about half of the grid, including P2 in the standings Hunter McElroy, as well as P2 contender Jacob Abel. Championship leader Christian Rasmussen got tagged and spun, but he did hold onto the lead lap and worked his way back up to a solid P5. Louis Foster took the win from pole, ahead of Nolan Siegel, who greatly benefited from the carnage to put him only 5 points behind McElroy. Daniel Frost rounds out the podium, his first time back on it after winning the opening round many months ago. Christian Bogle and Jamie Chadwick both got their new best results by finishing P4 and P6 respectively. Chadwick in particular is definitely on an upwards trajectory, although obviously massively aided by the carnage. Rasmussen retains a comfortable lead going into the final doubleheader at Laguna Seca and is thus an overwhelming title favourite, but the battle for P2 should be straight fire. USF Pro 2000 had its season finale at Portland with a lovely triple header. Race 1 had a super high attrition race, kick-started by a big pileup in turn 1, taking out big parts of the mid-pack. Unfortunately, Nikita Johnson got collected from P2 after once again impressing in quali on his second weekend in the series. Kiko Porto eventually inherited the lead after poleman Michael D'Orlando got penalised for cutting turn 1, and the Brazilian hung on to it until the very end ahead of overwhelming championship leader Miles Rowe. Bijoy Garg ended up in P3 to secure his first podium in the category. Rowe secured the championship title in race 2 by bringing it home in P3 behind P2 Nikita Johnson, who doubled up on his USF 2000 podium. Great feat of both driving and endurance by the 15-year-old. Michael D'Orlando led lights to flag, taking P4 in the championship from Liram Zindelli in the process. The TJ Speed driver still had an impressive drive, taking P4 miles ahead of teammate Francesco Pizzi, and was briefly running in P2 after an incredible opening lap. Salvador De Alba managed to hold on to P3 in the standings by taking P2 in the final, incredibly chaotic race of the season. The last window went, yet again, to brilliant youngster Nikita Johnson, taking the lead from D'Orlando and never looking back. Jonathan Brown completed the podium for only his second time this season, while heavy hitters Porto and Zandelli collided to end their final races prematurely. USF 2000 had its season finale as well, with yet another triple-header. Race 1 had a top 3 lockout from Pabst Racing in quali, and Jacob Douglas managed to bring it home from pole to take his maiden victory. Championship leader Simon Sykes eventually had to concede P2 to Evagoras Papasavas, but retained a comfortable lead as nearest rival Lockie Hughes finished in P5 just behind his P2 rival Nikita Johnson. Douglas took a lights to flag win in race 2 as well, while Simon Sykes secured a championship from P2 with Matt Clark completing the podium. Johnson finished in P4 and crucially Hughes was struggling quite a bit, slipping to P12 over the course of the race. Thus, Johnson took over P2 in the standings from him by 6 points. Johnson managed to defend set P2 in the third race with a nice comeback from a bad grid position, finishing ahead of Hughes in P7. Sykes ended the season in style, denying Douglas the hat-trick by taking the lead on lap 1 and holding it until the very end. GT World Challenge Europe had its third sprint round at Hockenheim. Race 1 had a first stint battle between Ricardo Feller and pole sitter Jordan Pepper. Feller ultimately got his Trezor Orange 1 Audi into the lead just before the pit stops. Pepper's VSR Lamborghini lost out quite a bit during the stop before ultimately retiring with a late race puncture. Matteo Drudi got to secure the win for the number 40 Audi after briefly losing out to the number 12 Come2 Audi in the pits. Audi was rather dominant in general, although more in quali than during the race, where the low starting BMWs and the Imminfra Racing Ferrari could make rapid progress. Third place was decided by an epic last corner move from Theo Vermeulen on Dries Van Tor, taking the podium from the number 32 WRT Beamer. The WRT 30 took the gold win in P5 overall, ahead of P2 in class the number 10 Boutsen VDS Audi. Silver went to the number 77 HRT Mercedes, thanks to a great opening stint from Jordan Love, and Dennis Marshall had an epic carry performance in bronze, running in the podium positions during the opening stint to hand a class win to the Trezor Attempto Audi number 66. Championship leader Akada's AMG number 88 had to retire early on after Timo Bogoslavski got involved in an incident. Raffaele Marcello turned their fate around though, going from P3 to the lead during race 2 before building a magnificent gap ahead of the Audi and BMW pack forming up behind. This ensured the ATN could retain its championship lead. Drudi and Feller had a good run again, but dropped quite a few spots in the pits following a jump start penalty. The resulting P4 can still be very much considered a success. Come2 Audi number 11 ended up in P2 ahead of Santelok Junior Audi number 25. WRT had a good showing yet again with 3 cars in the top 11, but lacked that final punch for a podium finish. Unfortunately, their number 30 gold entry had to retire early on this time around, handing the gold win to the number 9 VDS Audi. Silver went to the number 99 Audi this time around, although the number 77 had another strong race with P2 in class and just behind the 99 on track. And its sister car, the number 79, managed to take a rather convincing bronze win in the hands of team owner Hubert Haupt. MotoGP returned for its Barcelona round, and Aprilia was there to take the fight to Pecco Bagnaia and the Ducatis. Great qualifying performance allowed the factory Aprilias to pressure Bagnaia, and Aleix Espargaro managed to find a way past into the lead of the sprint race and never looked back. In clean air, the bike was clearly the quickest out there, reflected in the P3 from Maverick Vinales and the P6 from Miguel Oliveira. Brad Binder also showed up for the factory KTM squad, putting the bike behind Vinales in P4. Teammate Jack Miller had nowhere near the same success, dropping well down the order early on with no pace to get back up again. The Aprilias could replicate their pace in the GP, taking an unprecedented 1-2 finish with Aleix Espargaro ahead of teammate Vinales after a late race overtake. This incredible result was overshadowed by a massive lap 1 incident though, in which pole sitter Bagnaia got a massive high side from nowhere, crashing right ahead of the entire pack. This resulted in Binder running over his legs Fortunately, first reports suggest no major injuries. Bagnaia was obviously still out of the race, opening up the final podium spot from Jorge Martin ahead of teammate Zarco after the pair successfully fought their way past Oliveira. Yamaha also seemed to have figured out something overnight, as Fabio Quartararo was also able to fight in the mid-pack this time around, even overtaking Miller's factory KTM for a P7 finish. To nobody's surprise, Honda remains the same shitshow it's been all year. And now for some Formula 4 related news. Danish F4 had a quadruple header at Djursland, which saw a change in the championship lead thanks to a pair of wins from Mikkel Pedersen compared to a single win from rival Magnus Pedersen. Potentially more interesting though was the debut from Leo Robinson, who has so far spent his year in the Ginetta Junior Championship. The Algerian youngster made his way onto the podium in all 4 races, not something I was expecting, despite the questionable quality of the Danish F4 grid. The NACAM F4 Series finally saw someone snap the incredible 8-race win streak from Pedro Juan Moreno, but only after the Colombian took home the W in race 1. Race 2 went to second in the standings Christian Cantu, while race 3 was won by the only other driver with a race win to his name, Marco Alquicira. Only 2 runs to go means Moreno should be rather comfortable with his lead though. And last but not least, finally some more relevant karting action as the WSK Euro Series began at Francortia this weekend. The OK category had an unlikely win from Latvian Tomas Stoltzamanis. The 16-year-old had a ridiculous start, going from P5 to P1 within a single corner, and then defended his lead successfully against Kirill Kutskov. Gabriel Gomez completed the podium for CRG as pole sitter René Lammers struggled to hang with the frontrunners and had to settle for P7. The pretty stacked and newly expanded Prema roster had a best result of P4 from Enzo Tanmanitschko ahead of teammate Alex Palou, while Keen Nakama Roberto was mostly going backwards to a slightly underwhelming P11 finish. The OK Junior final was rather chaotic, with a bunch of big names disappearing over the course of the messy 16 laps. Among those, newly signed Prema driver and reigning European champion Alexander Bondarev dropping from P3 after an incident. Pole sitting Time Saleh could not quite hang on to the lead and had to settle for P2 after an intense battle with eventual winner Tony Kart's Scott Lindblom. Young Austrian Niklas Schaufler had a pretty stunning drive from the mid-pack all the way to P3, although obviously aided by the high attrition rate. My driver of the week is Alex Palou, securing his second IndyCar title with a win just as dominant as the ones that got us talking in the middle of the season. It is notable that out of all the titles secured this weekend, his looks easily the most convincing out of all of them. With a season worst result of P8 to his name, this has to be one of the most dominant IndyCar titles in recent memory. I for one can't wait to see more of that next year, or next week at Laguna Seca for that matter. Who was your driver of the week? Let me know down in the comments. While next week is going to be just as eventful as this one was, with the return of WEC, DTM, more MotoGP, the final round in IndyCar and IndyNXT, and finally some more Andrea Kimi Antonelli action in Freca, next week's episode might be either different or delayed, as I'll be watching the Karting World Championship in person, meaning I can't spend that time watching all the other amazing races. Anyway, thanks for watching, take care, and remember, racing is more than just F1.